So we start here at this line that says, what if I want many samples? And what we want to demonstrate with this is sometimes we want to do what we did here in the code above, where we wanted to take 6 samples. And so if it's only 6, it's okay to write the same code over and over again, 6 times. But what if I want 1,000 samples? Because in the type of resampling statistics that we are looking at in this block of yours, that is exactly what we want to do. We want to take many different samples. So we are not going to write the same line of code 1,000 times. Even if we can copy and paste, we are not going to write the same code 1,000 times. And so that's what I'm going to show you now, a thing called a for loop. And almost every coding language probably has some version of this. And it is a function that helps you to run the same line of code many times. So firstly, we create an object called manySampleDF with tibble that you've seen before. If you run this, you see it looks like this, and this is we're going to save our answers in here. If you get an error when you run this, I don't remember now whether your code only has an NA in it or whether it also has this NA underscore real underscore in it. But if it doesn't have this and you get an error, then just change your code to have this NA underscore real underscore, and then it should work. Okay, so we're going to save the answers we get from our for loop into this column mean weight. And you'll see how that happens just now. We're going to set the seed. I'm just arbitrarily using 33. We've explained before what set seed does. So here is where the for loop starts. And that is the whole for loop. In this case, it's very short. And as you can see, what is new are these curly brackets. You haven't seen them or used them before. So the function in this case is for, and you can see, like before, it is followed by a round bracket and a closing round bracket. And inside here, there's some arguments, but then there's this curly bracket, and inside it, something else happens. So what a for loop does is it, as you can see, it says here, for I in 1, 2, 1,000. So remember, this colon in the middle just says start at 1 and go all the way to 1,000. So that is basically just a placeholder for the sequence 1, 2, 3 all the way to 1,000. So we're telling we're telling R, we want you to start at 1 and go up to 1,000. And then the I part comes into play now in this next line of code, the code inside the curly brackets. We're telling R, every time you see an I like this in the code, where you see an I like that, we want you to replace the I with one number from this sequence. So not with the whole sequence. We're not replacing this I with 1, 2, 3, 4 all at the same time. We're replacing this I with numbers from this sequence one at a time. So when R sees this, it says, okay, I'm going to replace I with 1. Then I'm going to run this line of code. Then I'm going to replace I with 2. Then I'm going to run this line of code. Then I'll replace it with 3. Then I'll run this line of code, and I'll go on like that until I reach 1,000. And then when it reaches 1,000, it's going to look at your bracket and see, okay, that's where I stop. And then it's going to stop. So instead of having to write the same line of code 1,000 times, if I want to do it 1,000 times, I only write these 3 lines of code. And that is what R is going to do. Sorry for all these reminders. And that's what R is going to do for me. The line of code inside the curly brackets, as you will see, is exactly the same line of code that we used before. The only difference is that instead of just calling each one as something, we are saving it into this column. So I'm telling it which object, and then inside the square brackets, and then inside the square brackets you can see we're going to save it into this column, column 2. So this column, so all of it's going to go into column 2, but then the I, as it gets replaced, so the first time into the first line, then R is going to change I into 2, then that's going to be the second line, and it's going to go on like that. So that's what R is going to do. So you should run this line of code now. Then we're going to make a plot again, and then I want you to continue down here and answer these questions. And remember the outcomes of the session, because that's what the questions are trying to help you to also grasp.